Tonight on Talking Points, the month-long battle for President Trump's border wall is moving to the courts. Activist organizations and even the state of California is gearing up to sue.
And later, Amazon's plans to bring their HQ2 to NYC are off the table. The deal faced fierce criticism from progressive voices, and many are still left wondering what Amazon will do next.
And American citizens targeted in the capital of Haiti, leading the U.S. State Department to issue a travel advisory. Find out why Haiti's U.S. embassy was evacuated. All that and more tonight on Talking Points. Good evening, I'm Elijah Shama.
And I'm Gilad Malamed.
President Trump declared a national emergency on the border with Mexico on Friday to provide additional funding for the border wall.
After months of negotiations with Democrats, the deal reached a standstill. Trump argued that violence, drug trafficking, and illegal immigration at the border was grounds for unilateral action.
I'm going to be signing a national emergency. We're talking about an invasion of our country.
Now, Talking Points analyst Michael Furnari is here to tell us how Trump plans to pull this off, whether he can do so legally.
The months-long struggle over the government shutdown and President Trump's border wall is over. Only now, it's going to be replaced by a new one, the president's national emergency. After being offered about a fifth of the money he had originally wanted for the wall, President Trump will declare a national emergency in order to circumvent Congress and redirect funding. He plans to redirect roughly $6 billion to build 230 miles of barrier along the U.S.-Mexico border. The measure is already facing legal challenges. Multiple activist organizations, including the ACLU, have prepared lawsuits, and California's Attorney General plans to work with other states to take legal action against the White House. Trump's proposal would establish the 32nd active national emergency. So is this so different? Most of the active national emergencies involve foreign sanctions and human rights issues. This move by Trump may be an attempt to frame what is happening on the southern border as a humanitarian crisis as opposed to a political wedge issue. Time and the courts will tell if that interpretation holds water.
So, Michael, you just talked a little bit about some of the details of this, but why is this happening now?
I think what we're seeing is there's kind of a tension between what President Trump needs to accomplish here and now to kind of accomplish those political goals he's been kind of enumerating, and what the future is for the party, what the future is for him, and what the future is for kind of a vision post-2020. So right now he's trying to deliver on a campaign promise, and we're coming off a months-long struggle over this border wall, and I think he feels like if he doesn't come away with something out of this, if he doesn't come away with a little bit of progress, he's going to look weak and the shutdown will look pointless. But then there's kind of a tension between that and maybe some of the long-term issues the party and the country are facing.
He doesn't need their votes anymore, but just for political support, is he going to get that from congressional Republicans?
That's a really good question. It's something that will definitely, it's going to be difficult to predict. So Lindsey Graham is a good example of somebody who recently, he came out in support of this proposal, and that's something that I think a lot of people weren't expecting because Lindsey Graham is considered kind of a traditional Republican. He was very opposed to President Trump during his candidacy in 2016. But he's kind of come around, and I think that's a good barometer of where kind of the regular establishment Republicans will fall. But certainly you're going to see a little bit of opposition from kind of the more constitutionalist types.
So we've talked a little bit about some of that opposition. Are we going to see opposition from people like the Freedom Caucus? Are we going to see opposition from the public?
So one example here in Syracuse was that there were actually protests. About 70 people were at the federal building in downtown Syracuse protesting. And there have been some kind of spotty protests around the country over this issue. And I think about 3 in 10 Americans right now, as opposed to kind of the rough polling data we have, are opposed to the national emergency and think that or 3 in 10 rather, think it's appropriate for him to declare it. So it seems like an unpopular measure now. If he gets progress, maybe that figure will change a little bit.
All right, Michael, thank you. Certainly we'll be monitoring how the legality of this plays out. And we're joined now by SCOTUS Focus analyst Gabrielle Caracciolo. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case on whether or not to allow the 2020 census to include this question. Is this person a citizen of the United States? A lower court originally ruled to stop the question from going into effect. Talking Points SCOTUS analyst Gabrielle is here to break down the debate. Gabrielle, why the controversy surrounding this question?
Right, so those who oppose it say that what is going to actually happen if you add this question to the census is that houses that have anyone who's undocumented in the house, even if it's only one member of a family unit, are not going to answer any questions at all, and that's going to result in a decrease and inaccurate numbers, especially in communities with a high number of immigrants and people of color.
So why would the Trump administration want this? What do they gain from having this question on the census?
Right, so Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is the one who said, okay, let's put this on, even though he was advised not to. And what he is saying is that in order to properly enforce the Voting Rights Act of who can vote, you need to be a citizen, that they need to know through the census.
Now, last week when you were on the show, we were talking about that abortion case that the court saw, and you were saying how Chief Justice John Roberts likes to stick to precedent. He doesn't like to take up things that are too controversial, but this is certainly a hot topic.
Well, you're right. It definitely is. But in this case, we're working on a tight deadline, and this is an extremely important issue because both sides are saying that what they believe, either adding the question or not adding the question, is what's going to give the most accurate census. And the census is what determines how many electoral college votes each state gets. So the implications of this are tenfold, and so it is important that it's decided on a tight deadline. So I think that's why they're having it go straight to the Supreme Court instead of keeping it in the lower courts.
Now, Gabrielle, this wasn't always a controversial issue. In the past, there has been a citizenship question on the census. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it was about 70 years ago. 1950 was the last time this was done, but it wasn't asked in this manner. What they did was they first asked where everyone in a household was born, and then the second question was that if anybody's answer to that first question was not the United States, are you a naturalized citizen for those people who were not born in the U.S.? So it went about it a little bit different way, but it certainly did not used to be a controversial question to be asking.
The 2020 census forms are going out in just a few months, so I imagine there has to be quite a tight deadline on this. Can you break that down a little bit for us?
Right, so this question they said almost a year ago was when it was approved and it went through lower courts. Right now it's been blocked. The Supreme Court just said at the end of last week that they will hear the case. There are going to be hearings in the end of April, and then by June is when the census forms are set to be printed. So they're going to need a decision by then. But if the Supreme Court doesn't come to a decision, the lower court ruling will stand and the question will not be printed.
All right, so based on that timeline, what kind of a vote are we seeing just very quickly? Are we going to see that party line split, or do we expect Roberts to do something crazy like he did in Louisiana?
It's really hard to say how Roberts is going to go, but it's certain that whatever he decides is really what's going to decide whether or not this question is going to go forward.
All right, definitely one we're going to have to take a look at moving forward. Gabrielle, thank you. And coming up next on Talking Points, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is taking a new turn. We'll break down what those new developments are right here after the break.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate. It's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Despite Governor Cuomo and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio's support, Amazon's plan for an HQ2 in New York is off. Amazon announced Thursday they would no longer be building in Queens. The Amazon plan received fierce criticism from some New York lawmakers. Here to break down the deal's failure is Talking Points analyst Anthony DeBundo. Now, Anthony, it received some fierce criticism, but clearly Governor Cuomo and Bill de Blasio were very on board with this. So ultimately, why did the deal fail?
Well, Cuomo and Bill de Blasio were all in on this deal. They thought, Cuomo once said that he would change his name to Amazon Cuomo if it meant getting Amazon here. And despite the $3 billion tax cut that the New York State was willing to give to Amazon, they received a lot of criticism, specifically from Michael Gianaris, who's a New York State senator. He was recently elected to a board on the Planning Commission in New York City. So that meant that he had veto power over any building that would happen within New York City, which meant that he had the ability to block any Amazon deal. So without getting him to support it, there was no way that they could get the support to ultimately go through with the building.
So Amazon is back on the retail market now. So what are they going to do moving forward? What's the next real estate option for Amazon?
They haven't announced any type of plan for a second HQ2. Of course, they have the first one in Virginia that is set to bring 25,000 jobs to the Northern Virginia and the D.C. area. That's going to be a huge economic boom for them, many experts say. But it's unclear if they're even going to build a second one. For now, they said that they might just be happy with the two headquarters in Seattle and Virginia. However, there have been some people in upstate New York saying, hey, why not us?
Now, it's not just Amazon that's, undergoing these types of things. We see a lot of things where, the state really wants a big corporate headquarters. They'll offer up everything. Can you tell us about some other corporate deals that have been in the works?
Right, so they're called mega deals. There's been 25 a year of deals above $50 million or more in the last 12 years. So it's becoming more and more frequent where the government is willing to give these tax breaks and tax cuts to these larger corporations who say they're going to bring jobs. And the most famous one, of course, was Foxconn in Wisconsin, where President Trump called it Foxconn the eighth wonder of the world. They're a tech company that was supposed to build outside of Wisconsin. They were going to bring 13,000 jobs and $10 billion in economic stimulus. Well, what happened ultimately was that the tax cuts didn't work. They didn't bring as many jobs as they said they would, and the deal completely failed. So that's kind of the main reason we've seen all the criticism for this Amazon deal. Because people are saying, well, do we actually know this is going to work, and can we handle the burden of what it would bring?
And speaking of people who think they can handle the burden, we've had a lot of New York upstate senators saying, well, bring it here.
Right.
If it's not in New York, why not here? Is that feasible? Is this a realistic claim?
Right, so John Katko and Anthony Brindisi, two Central New York House members, wrote a letter to Amazon saying, hey, you should consider upstate New York. Now, the reality is, I spoke with the chief data analyst of Syracuse, Sam Edelstein, last week. He said it's not feasible, that Syracuse isn't prepared to handle the infrastructure, the traffic problems, the road problems, the housing issues, that they would not be able to handle all of the change and the turmoil that would happen from that.
All right, Anthony, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And there's been new developments in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian meddling in the 2016 elections. More big players have been interviewed by Mueller's team, and more connections are starting to be made. Here to discuss the details of what's gone down is Talking Points analyst Brandon Ross.
There's been a lot of news out of the Mueller probe, starting in Paul Manafort's case. Manafort's guilty plea has been revoked after it was discovered he gave false statements to investigators. A federal judge involved in the case said that he lied in order to protect a conspirator in a pro-Russian lobbying effort. Prosecutors are recommending he serve at least 19 years in prison, and that would be close to a life sentence for the 69-year-old. Meanwhile, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says she was interviewed by Mueller's team. The interview occurred late last year, around the same time the special counsel's office interviewed a number of other senior officials. Sanders added that President Trump urged her and everyone else to fully cooperate with the investigation and that she was voluntarily happy to sit down with them. And finally, the most groundbreaking of all the updates is the new developments in former Trump campaign advisor Roger Stone's court case. Special counsel prosecutors said in a court filing from last week that they have evidence of direct communication between Stone and WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks was responsible for the release of thousands of hacked Democratic emails during the 2016 campaign. Prosecutors had previously said they had evidence of Stone trying to reach out to WikiLeaks, but this is the first word of any possible direct ties.
So, Brandon, the Stone news is incredibly shocking, but what does this mean for President Trump?
So the original Stone indictment said he had informed senior Trump campaign officials that WikiLeaks had the first batch of emails, and then after that dump, the Trump campaign requested more. And there was this key sentence from the Stone indictment. Here it is word for word. A senior Trump campaign official was directed to contact Stone about any additional releases and what other damaging information Organization One had regarding the Clinton campaign. In that statement, Organization One is WikiLeaks, and a senior Trump campaign official, a lot of people are speculating, could only have gotten direction from President Trump or potentially someone else very high up in his campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, and that could be really damaging as this is getting really close to the president.
Thank you, Brandon. Rebel attacks in Kashmir have left dozens dead. Stay with us to find out how these attacks could influence India's upcoming elections.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice, single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown, and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Smokey, catch! Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
U.S. advisory has been issued and all non-essential U.S. personnel have been ordered to leave Haiti after more than a week of deadly protests in the nation. Talking Points analyst Sabrina Majore has the latest on the continued demonstrations.
Thanks, guys. At least 7 deaths have been reported in the protests that have paralyzed parts of Haiti. Demonstrators are calling for the president, Jovenel Moïse, to resign over corruption allegations and ineffective handling of the nation's rising inflation rates. Protesters are especially upset over the administration's handling of a program called Petrocaribe. The program, financed by Venezuela, allowed Haiti to receive oil at a discounted price. The money saved from that discounted oil was supposed to go towards social programs following the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. Anti-Moïse demonstrators are demanding to know where that money went. The protests, which have stalled economic activity and closed schools and businesses, are now threatening a humanitarian crisis. Hospitals are especially feeling the consequence of the protests, many of which are running low on water, medicine, and supplies. In a televised address Thursday, President Moïse pledged to investigate the money misspent from the Petrocaribe program. He rejected calls to resign, and he called for talks with the opposition.
There are not two paths. There are not two solutions. There is only one. Sit down to talk, to decide together what we are going to do for our nation.
Banks, supermarkets, and stores reopened this weekend after protesters announced a reprieve, allowing Haitians in some areas to restock on necessities like food, water, and propane gas. According to Voice of America, a schedule sent to journalists by protesters listed plans for more demonstrations this week. Elijah Galat, back to you.
Thanks, Sabrina. Just days after a suicide bombing killed over 40 Indian security personnel, 9 more people are dead after a gunfight broke out today in the Indian government-administered region of Kashmir. With general elections just around the corner, pressure is mounting for Indian Prime Minister Modi to punish the Kashmiri rebels. Talking Points analyst Tyler Lowell is here to help us understand what the growing conflict might mean for the future of the Southeast Asian region. Tyler, so let's begin by talking about what is the conflict in Kashmir, because it's been around for a really long time.
Yeah, it has. It has been around for a very long time. It's primarily a conflict over land. So if you were to look at a map, I think we're going to see one on the screen in just a moment, you'd see that this region is sort of sandwiched between Pakistan and India. And so this land conflict of who gets control of it goes back way before either of those two countries gained independence from Britain back in 1947. And so, tensions have oscillated and have flared up and calmed down, since then. But we've reached a moment now where things are starting to heat back up again. And with elections around the corner, it's certainly a concern for people on the ground.
So things are heating back up. So why is there all this unrest on that India-administered part?
Sure. So a couple days ago, there was a suicide. Last week, actually, there was a suicide bombing that killed over 40 people, and the credit for that was taken by Pakistani rebel groups. And so the way that it's being spun by the media now is that Pakistan is responsible for the attack, which they've flat out denied, the Pakistani government. On top of that, that Indian-controlled territory, it's primarily Muslim, and they don't want to be controlled by Indian forces. They would rather have independence of their own or join forces with the Pakistani side. And so their inability to live in the way that they want to is causing consternation.
All right, so what steps can be done now to kind of reduce this tension? I mean, we're talking about one of the most militarized zones on the planet.
Well, and that is what is causing some of that consternation that I had just mentioned. Because both of those countries are nuclear powers, this isn't a matter of just going to war to sort of work out how it will end, because that could have catastrophic implications for the rest of the world, right? So. Right now, what India is thinking about, but nothing has been confirmed yet, is sort of cutting off Pakistan from the rest of the world. Diplomatic isolation, right? So it's doing it the right way or the legal way, but the peaceful way without inciting a nuclear war.
Now, looking forward, India has its general elections coming up in a few months. What could this mean for that?
That remains to be seen, So because both of these countries are nuclear powers, and because those elections are right around the corner, there's a really strong and really active public sort of watching of how this situation is going to develop. Prime Minister Modi, with his re-election right around the corner, he can't stand to not act on this issue. And if you were to turn into Indian TV, you'd see that there are debates sort of dominating the airwaves on what India should do with Pakistan moving forward. And so, it's really just keeping an eye on the public reaction and seeing what they demand. But as of my last research on this, some Indians are calling for retribution. So it'll be interesting to see how that's handled.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. We're looking at one of the biggest conflicts in the world right now.
Certainly.
Tyler, thank you. And coming up, North Carolina's election board is investigating fraud allegations in the state's 9th congressional district. We'll look ahead at the fate of that contested race after the break.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. This is a serious problem, but one we can solve. Visit feedingamerica.org to help. Together we can solve hunger. Together we're feeding America.
Maybe he's really focused.
Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where the cats go on vacation? New York.
We believe the evidence that we will provide today will show that a coordinated, unlawful, and substantially resourced absentee ballot scheme operated during the 2018 general election in Bladen and Robinson counties.
Now, that was North Carolina Elections Director Kim Strach today. Today was the first day of hearings of the state's Board of Elections over the absentee ballot dispute in the 9th District congressional race. This was one race from November that did not receive certification, so 3 months after Election Day, there's still no official winner.
The hearing will determine whether or not mail-in ballots were tampered with by the state GOP. North Carolina requires absentee ballots to have a witness signature, usually a family member or a friend. But dozens of ballots were signed by the same handful of people, raising eyebrows. Now the state is looking at one of the Republican candidates' operatives, Leslie McCrae Dallas Jr., as the main person of interest.
Now the result of the race was razor thin. In November, Republican Mark Harris received only 905 more votes than his Democratic challenger. Democrat Dan McCready conceded, but then withdrew that concession.
The board's 3-day inquiry can have 3 major outcomes. Either Harris will be handed the victory, there will be a new election, or there'll be a stalemate.
So, looking forward, we're thinking, what's going to happen with this, Galat?
Certainly. I mean, it's been over 3 months, so now we have the inquiry. They're looking at that Republicans operative there. But the main thing, we've seen, issues of tampering, not just in this election, but there have been some raised eyebrows in other elections.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at Florida, especially Broward County, you had those votes that were found. You had email votes that were being sent in as absentee ballots. And then you kind of jump to other areas. I mean, you look at Georgia, where we had law about election rigging that was supposedly or allegedly happening in those states, and it swung a bunch of these races. We're not talking about big wins here. We're talking about 905 votes. We're talking about a couple thousand.
A lot of narrow wins here. We're going to bring in correspondent Anthony DeBundo to join us a little bit. Anthony, what are you thinking looking at this? It's been 3 months since Election Day. There's still no winner.
Right. We have no idea what's going to happen here. There's been so much controversy over the last 3 months where people have accused even both sides now of trying to rig the ballots and trying to have controversy. And it's not just the general election that was accused of being rigged. This goes all the way back to the primary in March when people accused the man who upset the incumbent of also trying to rig the primary and hiring these people like McCrae Dallas. So it's gone back and forth. At the end of the day, I think the only way that either side is going to be happy is if a new election is called. And there's no way that you can kind of say that if they do seat Mark Harris, that it's fair, because Democrats are going to be up in arms. And if they disqualify Harris, Republicans are going to claim that there's not enough evidence to say that he was part of it, even if it was people for his campaign. So I think at the end of the day, what we're probably going to see is a new election, and I think that's probably going to be the fairest way to decide it. There's probably going to just have to be a special election.
So if we're going to have this new election, are we going to see McCready versus Harris again? Because you just said, if they disqualify Harris, Republicans are going to be up in arms. McCready hasn't conceded, so who are they going to put up against him?
Well, it is probably going to be McCready and Harris again if they do it, and I think they would be much stricter, following of the rules and making sure that there is no shady business. The thing is, when North Carolina is running all of these huge elections at once, there's so much going on that things can be missed, like in this situation. But if you have a scenario where there's only one election and everybody's focused on it and everybody knows that there's been foul play in the past, people will be focused, we'll get a fair election, which is ultimately what is deserved for the people and the voters.
Yeah, it seems like there'd be much more, stringent restrictions on this if there's only one election to focus on. But certainly it then raises the question these candidates would have to raise money again, re-campaigning. You can't really expect the voters to remember their platforms from months ago, so that leads into a whole other situation.
Well, we saw in Georgia a couple years ago when John Ossoff ran against Karen Handel, where there were millions and millions of dollars being poured into this race in suburban Georgia, suburban Atlanta, that seemingly didn't matter that much. That one race doesn't matter that much, but with 2020 right around the corner, every race counts.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely going to be a battleground moving forward. And that's all the time we have for Talking Points tonight. Remember, you can see all of our episodes, webisodes, and specials on CitrusTV.com/talkingpoints. I'm Elijah Shama.
And I'm Gilad Malamed. Have a great night, Syracuse.